Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's press conference, getting over just a short while ago, where she's laid out the first of what seems to be a 4 or 5 part tranche. She said this is the first part, 4 more parts to come. Not immediately clear whether the second part will be tomorrow or staggered over a few days, but this is the thrust of what she said in her first press conference after the Prime Minister's big speech yesterday.
We have now come to a stage where we can happily announce that the definition being changed is being changed in favor of the MSMEs. Because there was always this fear in very successful MSMEs also that if they outgrow the size of what is defined as an MSME, they'll lose the benefits that they get as an MSME itself. So outgrowing this definition meant outgrowing and going out of receiving benefits. Therefore, MSMEs preferred to remain within the definition rather than grow. Now what we are coming with is a change in the definition of MSME so that they need not worry about growing in size. They will still be able to get quite a lot of benefits which otherwise, as an MSME, they had got. So now how do we change it? I told you why we are changing the definition. How are the changes being brought about? What exactly is the change which is coming in? The change is that investment limit which defined an MSME is being revised upwards. So you can...
The press conference of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had many points she laid out in great detail, but several questions still remain unanswered on the government's broad thrust. Remember, the Prime Minister spoke of land reform, labour reform, structural reform. Just what does the government intend to do from here on, and what's the big picture and what's been done so far? I'm joined at this time, live and exclusive, by the Vice Chairperson of the Niti Aayog, one of India's best-known economists, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who's been a key part of the government's economic thinking, and the Niti Aayog has been sending many proposals to the Prime Minister's office, to the Finance Minister, which are part of what we've seen, and he knows a little bit more about what may happen from here. Dr. Kumar, welcome. It's great to have you with us on India Today. Can you start by laying out what, according to you, is the big picture that the government is sending out in what we've seen so far?
There are 2 or 3 aspects of it, Rahul, of the big picture. And the first one, I must say, is that...
I hear you. Go on, Dr. Kumar. I hear you fine.
Somebody's interrupting in the studio. Anyway, so the first is that we will not let the cash crunch convert to insolvency, and especially in the segments which are the most vulnerable, which are the MSMEs, and which are also in some sense the backbone of our industrial capacity and the backbone of our employment, employment effort. They employ and 30% of our exports come from there. Now, these MSMEs have expectedly a much more limited staying power because, they are, as by definition, and that's what they are, the small and medium enterprises, and they were in the danger of going under and the entire production capacity there being destroyed. So this is why the first part, the very first part of the Prime Minister's and the Finance Minister's announcements have focused in such detail and in such large measure on resurrecting, reviving and rejuvenating the MSME sector. I add the word rejuvenating because of 2 measures that were announced by the Finance Minister today, which is one, that she has changed the very definition of the MSME sector.
No, but so to which we just had a very impassioned representative from the micro, small and medium enterprises. He said, this is very required, but why don't do it now? There's a fire that's burning my house down. Tell me, what am I doing to save my house? Some of the reclassification is important, but could have been done any time. Why wait for this crisis to do it?
No, not wait for the crisis, because, this is the point. Well, one, the fact is that thank God it's done now, and this is what they should be saying. But it's a part of the entire slew of packages of 3 crore of collateral-free debt which will be given, which is like an advance that you'll be given to pay, to meet your working capital requirements. This is a part of the 20,000 crore that you'll be given for stressed funds. Where the government will take the first 20% of loss. This is a part of the 50,000 crore that will be given as equity participation for those which are successful. Also a part of the fact that now you will have tenders not going global, which are below 200 crores, so that you can favor and you can support the MSMEs. So I don't think we should look a gift horse in the mouth.
Sure.
I mean, this is the government trying its level best at this moment to say that we want to resurrect the MSMEs, and this is what they've done.
Okay.
Now, if there are some other requirements that they have, they should let us know, and of course they'll be considered. But the government's focus on resurrecting the MSMEs is very clear, and that's one part of the big picture. And just one thing, Rahul, which is that by raising their size, what you're also hoping will happen is that they will go from being hyper-local to being able to integrate themselves in global value chains and create joint ventures with some of those firms which are wanting to come to India and invest.
Okay, Rajdeep Sardesai also joins me. He'll ask the next question. Rajdeep, your broad takeaways and the next question.
The MSME sector, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, is, as you rightly identified, the one that has been hit the most by the lockdown. The problem is the lockdown continues. To that extent, are today's announcements simply about buying time to ensure that the MSMEs survive the next few months, or is it about a revival of the MSMEs? Is it about survival, or is it really a plan for the future revival?
Rajdeep, it is certainly both. We can't revive without surviving. That's very clear. And I think, so therefore you have to do one along with the other. So, so the fact, for example, the collateral-free debt, fund of 3 lakh crore is a matter of preventing cash losses from becoming insolvency and getting bankruptcies and for the MSME from going under. But at the same time, the 50,000 crore equity fund, which has been proposed, is for those MSMEs which are doing better, for them to increase their scale and size, and that's also the part that's also the objective of the redefinition of the MSME sector itself. Now, I think this is where, and then just yesterday's fact, and done partly in some sense, reinforced today by the FM's announcement, the Prime Minister's way forward is to become global, which is that you be local and you therefore take advantages of the local, advantages that you have, but you aim globally and for global scales and global markets. I think therefore he was very clear in his speech yesterday that we would want our enterprises, small and medium enterprises and the large ones and others, to achieve global scales.
But how is that going to be achieved with what has happened today? The question is, the local part is well taken. The global part, that you can globally compete, what in today's announcements do you believe makes MSMEs more competitive globally?
For the one that I told you is just to be able to increase their size and to go up to 100 crore in revenues. Now, as they grow bigger, and for example, the the states, the announcements of the labor, labor market flexibility, which will permit these companies to have labor, take advantage of their labor costs, labor flexibility and lower labor costs, rather than be restricted by all the Inspector Raj, etc. that was going on. So, we are moving in that direction. And by increasing the size, giving them better access to technology, which I'm sure will be a part of the announcement that we go on, better access to credit. All of those are steps in the direction of these companies not becoming giants overnight, but becoming part of global and regional value chains, which is a step towards becoming global.
Dr. Rajiv Kumar, one of the things countries abroad have done is to provide wage and income support to employees so that they can survive. Now that's been a big concern. I know that there have been proposals from within the government pushing for income support. That wasn't announced. The approach seems to have been, let's try and save the company, and if the company survives, they'll pay the employees. But what's the guarantee that the owners will not take the benefit that's on offer and yet sack employees, leading to mass unemployment? How do you look at this question of income support? Why was it not pushed through ultimately? Can it still happen in the remaining tranches? And what's your thinking on this?
We'll have to wait and see, Rahul, and I do not propose to give you be able, and I'm not able to give any sneak peeks, as it were, into what the FM has in store for us for the next 3 or 4 days. But, for example, the EPFO concession, which is a major one, that, both the statutory payment by the workers as well as by the employers will now be borne by the government for an extra 3 months. Now, please remember that this is 12% on either side. So you're actually supporting, lowering the wage cost for the employers by 24%, and the government is going to bear that cost. On your statement, about, the employers or the business, the entrepreneurs taking advantage of this and not paying their workers, Rahul, I think it's high time that we stop mistrusting each other. It's high time that we work together as a team in India. And I think this is one of the biggest weaknesses that we have, that we continue to look at each other with suspicion and mistrust. I'm sure the Indian businessmen, the local the entrepreneurs, the small, medium, etc., will all work towards making India, towards reviving economic activity and making India's economic transition successful.
Can we look forward a little bit? The Prime Minister spoke of structural reform, labor reform, land reform. The last time, and you weren't in this job at that time, when the government pushed through land reform, you welcomed it. Later they came under pressure. They had to do a volte-face, suit boot ki sarkar, the jibe kind of stuck. And since then the government veered on a path of socialism, relative socialism. What's the guarantee that once things start becoming more normal, because the Uttar Pradesh change in labor laws is for 3 years. By the time you're saying bring new investment in, by the time the investment comes in thinking that this is the labor law, the government after 3 years may come under pressure and change. And same with land law. You pushed the change through the Land Acquisition Act last time. The government came under pressure, they did a U-turn.
Yeah, you see, so I hadn't heard the Prime Minister so far being so explicit about in favor of bold reforms and jettisoning the incremental approach. I hadn't heard the Prime Minister say as emphatically as he has said yesterday about the Indian economy having to be take its place in the global global marketplace, in the global economy, and making good of it. I hadn't also heard the Prime Minister talk about all the stakeholders coming together. I'm saying all of this to tell you that I think this is a new beginning, and therefore one should not recount the past. And the fact also remains that at the same time the government never rescinded the land reform, but gave the autonomy and the choice to the states to implement it. And therefore the law remains on the statute books. So there is no reversal in that sense.
But
now, but hang on, just 1 second. The land question is, I think, a bogey, because what we are trying to do now in DPIIT and other parts is to create, and the states are doing that, is to create an inventory of land holdings which are already with the government and with public sector agencies, and making them available for potential investors, so that the whole issue of land acquisition, etc., does not arise. I know for a fact that we are working on digitization of land records and of torrents laws to be taking place, so that the whole issue of land titling becomes very clear. So therefore there are many ways to skin a cat, and we don't need to be always talking about the past, because the future we can make available, I think, lakhs of hectares.
But Mr. Kumar, the key to the future, in a way, is also changing systems. The Prime Minister mentioned it yesterday. And a key to those systems remain bureaucratic and administrative reforms on the ground. MSMEs in particular often complain of the bureaucracy and of Inspector Raj. They are the ones who claim that they face the worst of the Inspector Raj. What is it that can be done? Today what you've done, as I come back to it, is essentially given them a path for survival, which is important in the present context of Corona times. But revival will require change in systems. Do you agree? Whether it's land, whether it's labor, whether it's bureaucracy, those will have to change.
Well, I mean, if they have to change, they will change. This is what the Prime Minister's message is. And because otherwise he wouldn't emphasize, bold structural reforms. Now, the fact is that, we can keep talking about what needs to be done, but in our complex democracy and in the system that we have inherited, there are the most
We
give us
seem to have
some
lost
moment.
Rajiv Kumar. Okay.
We'll get him back very quickly. Rajdeep, what did you think of the finance minister's announcement?
You know, Rahul, I think it was important in the context of sending out a message. I think this is exactly 3 lakh guaranteed loans is even more than what was being asked for in a way by the MSME sector. They were talking of 1 lakh crore worth of loans. It's gone up to 3 lakhs. I think it's important, the change in definition. In fact, that's where the government, I think, has bitten the bullet, because there are those who would have, suggested that there may be a political fallout of that. But by doing that, you've actually suggested that the government is willing to take a few tough decisions. The definition in that sense does suggest an important decision. I think the problem at the moment is, A, whether there's enough liquidity to ensure that these MSMEs can survive. And the fact is that at the moment, there is no activity. None of what has happened today is going to revive that activity overnight till we solve the corona problem.
Mamata Banerjee has slammed the centre over the stimulus package. She's tweeted moments before now to say that people across the country were hopeful, but they've got nothing but a big zero. She says nothing has been given to the states and has called this the beginning of the recession. That's Mamatanomics for you.
You know, that, and it's very interesting that she's saying it at the moment, Rahul, where she's just gone and announced that she's going to give a 10,000 rupee bonus, I think, to all government employees. Now, here is a government which says they are bankrupt, and yet, because they know that they've got to fight an election within a year, they've gone and given this big bonanza.
No, but there you see there's a big difference. Narendra Modi doesn't like giving doles. You know, even here, they've given
you
a
have to
loan.
repay the loan. In fact, an MSME friend of mine rang me up to say, my problem is, it's all very well to say, I'm giving you this loan. At the end of the day, I will have to repay the loan. When will I repay the loan? Because that's the real challenge. Unless I revive the economic cycle, unless I'm able to make myself more competitive, I will not generate the incomes to repay the loans. I think that is one concern that MSMEs have. You want to quickly dip into P. Chidambaram? Finance Minister, I'm told, is doing a press conference. We might want to just listen in. I presume that the opposition is like Mamata Banerjee. The Congress is also, in a way, going to be critical. But remember, Chidambaram said 1 lakh crore guaranteed loans to be given, loan assistance to MSMEs. The Finance Minister has gone beyond that.
Rajiv Kumar is back.
Okay.
So, Dr. Kumar, the next question is about labor reform. You know, a lot of free market advocates also are saying, is this the right time to make it easier to hire and fire? Yes, our labor laws are hugely rigid, and ordinarily every sensible person will say you need to give companies more leeway to be able to scale up, scale back as they want. But at a time of such acute distress, countries worldwide are providing extra security covers and nets. We haven't announced any extra security net. Rather, whatever semblance of protection there was is now being taken away.
I am not clear as to how the safety net is being withdrawn. I think the entire safety net as it existed earlier, but for a very small percentage of labor force, which is in the formal sector, 8 to 10%, remains where it is. In fact, the government has offered to pay the APFO contribution for both the employers and the employees. The ECIS remains in place, etc., etc. Now, what the 6 state governments have done, and labor is a state subject, is to freeze or withdraw, in fact, change, and depend on the states that are there, to make the labor market much more flexible, and to reduce the call by the labor inspector, and withdraw the Factories Act, withdraw the Industries Disputes Act, and so on. Now, Rahul, you must remember that, and the Prime Minister included that in the address, that the worst affected are those who are in the informal sector. Now, that's the one where he talked about the ready-walas, which are the street vendors and so on, which are the self-employed, and they will have to be given succor. And because he's mentioned it, I expect that to happen. And the Finance Minister talked about the migrant workers today in her own speech. So I think they will form a part of the next phase of announcement that you have.
So why not do everything in one day, sir? Just like, why break it up into tranches?
Why not? But why not? So as to keep the focus on what you're trying to achieve. Today was the big day for the MSMEs, and also for the individual taxpayers, because their TDS has been reduced by 25%, and so that's going to put more money, but that's where the demand is going to come from. But do please remember that that in the next that today's announcement, in my sort of just back of the envelope totting up, is about 5.25 lakh crore. and the package that's been announced, if you also take, whatever, it's got another similar amount, if not more, left to be allocated, which will be allocated I'm assuming to provision of the safety net to take care, to provide succor.
And the resources themselves, Mr. Kumar, where do they come from?
Well, the finance minister has said, and I'll repeat her, that let's wait till all the announcements are made. And by the way, I've never been a fiscal hawk, and I've consulted the staunchest fiscal hawks in the country and abroad. And what everybody is saying, that fiscal prudence is a dynamic concept. You can either reduce the expenditure and see the GDP go down and the fiscal deficit ratio worsening, or you can take steps to accelerate the GDP growth, increase the denominator, and see the fiscal ratio come down. So, let's not get hidebound by the FRBM mantra of 3.33%, etc., etc. Fiscal resources will be made available, can be made available without any impact, a negative impact on the macroeconomic balances of this country in the condition in which we are. Mm-hmm. The question is today that you don't want to slip into a downward spiral, which is threatening us in an unprecedented time, which has got the global economy where it is. So what you need to do is to be bold, and which the Prime Minister has promised to be. The Finance Minister has shown that she is going to be that, and I'm sure the fiscal equations will be balanced.
Would you concede, Dr. Kumar, that this year growth in India will be negative, that we are slipping into recession territory, that there is no way that we can have the 1.9% positive growth that the IMF had plotted in their World Economic Outlook for India?
I am not going to be commenting on what the IMF says or not, whether we'll get 7.2%, etc., etc. But I've said before, and I say again, that there are very brave people who are making any forecast at this point of time, because we don't know nothing at all. There are too many unknowns going forward, and God forbid, but if the pandemic extends, etc., or if the global economy just simply sinks. I mean, I've heard now figures of negative 6% contraction in the US and in the Europe area. This could even become worse. So I'm not willing to take any bets or say anything about it. What must be done, though, is that we must be able to revive economic activity in our country, within the next quarter, and then get this economy back onto a.
But that is entirely. But you would concede that's entirely dependent on how successful the government is in controlling COVID. I mean, people call this India's. After yesterday, the Prime Minister's speech, I heard people call it India's 1991 moment. In 1991, there was one clear target: to revive a sinking economy. Yes, today we are a stronger economy in terms of our fundamentals, but we are fighting wars at two fronts, Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, and I think we have both the human talent and resources, as well as the economic and fiscal resources to fight the two-front war. And we will fight it. We have, of course, the lowest fertility rate in the world today at the moment, going forward. We have some structural, features on our side, like our demographic profile, etc. So I think, I feel confident that we'll be able to fight a two-front war because of our resolve to be bold, and because of our resolve to be focused on on saving lives and reviving livelihoods.
I want to welcome Vikram Kirloskar, President CII, but I have one more question for Dr. Rajiv Kumar before we let him go. Is there a contradiction, Dr. Kumar, in the idea of pushing for self-reliance and wanting to enhance exports? Is there a bit of a mixed message? Because global supply, so let me just explain and set the context. Global supply chains are hugely complex. Not as if it's not a binary where the entire production line moves to India. Part of the production line moves, the rest of it comes in, whether it's from Taiwan or China or elsewhere. How do you enhance self-reliance and become a part of the global supply chain at the same time?
You increase self-reliance by making sure, for example, that your net exports remain positive. And that's the mantra of self-reliance. Not self-reliance doesn't mean protectionism or closing yourself out from everybody else. You have to define self-reliance in the right manner. And the self-reliance is, for example, the Chinese self-reliance, which has done the China. I mean, that the China, its seamless between public and private sector. The Chinese government support to firms after firms after firms has been tremendous, and yet they are global. You can't deny that they are global.
So will you
The top
enhance self-reliance by enhancing excise duties so that it's more viable and lucrative to manufacture in India, at least for the domestic market?
Look, there is just no one size which will fit all. Every company, every sector, every industry will need to be looked into, and the devil is in the detail. You have to go down to the weeds. The time for taking these big sweep mantras, import substitution, export promotion, it is long past us. We wasted too much time on all of that. And I think what we need to do is to bend our back and to get into these nitty-gritties, for which reason the government has now passed 3 bills, the 3 cabinet resolutions to say that we will have packages for 3 different sectors: the the electronic hardware, the medical devices, and the APIs. And if you read through, then you will find they're all 3 are.
Okay, we'll leave it there for the time being. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, for joining us and sharing your views, thank you very much. Deeply appreciate your time, Vice Chairperson of the Niti Aayog. Let's